Before we get started, I think I need to define exactly what we're doing today. And I want to go through some of the procedural history of this case. So on February 9th, we had a hearing, and I confirmed with everybody at the time that we were there for a hearing on whether to approve the emergency minor guardianship. At that time, Mr. Anagnostou said that he was not ready, and Ms. Crape indicated she wanted to retain counsel. So based on that, we continued it to March 23rd. On March 23rd, Ms. Winkles had been retained, and she asked for a continuance. And it became clear to me that this was a case that was going to take some time for a hearing, but the hearing was still going to be about the emergency minor guardianship. So on March 23rd, we put this over to today. The briefing I received suggests that counsel may be under the impression that this was for the appointment of a full guardian. And I wanted to go through that procedural history because I don't think that's what we're here for today. We're here for the appointment of an emergency guardian, which would be good for 60 days. And then if a full guardianship is sought, and I know there's been a petition for that filed, that would have to be brought before one of the Superior Court judges. Does that surprise anyone, or what's let me know your response to that.
Yes, Your Honor. I prepped it for full minor guardianship because the petition was on, and sometimes they're conjoined. The fact is that it's actually more difficult to get the emergency than the full. So my hope is that my clients have, paid for my services, and should they not need me in the future, or should this court need any information, that essentially the information remains the same. And so if a full petition, the same trial briefing can be used. Your Honor, I don't know if Kurt Anagnostou is in agreement. I'm not sure if the parties agree we can conjoin the hearings today and have it be on both. I'm not sure what Your Honor thinks about that, but it does make for judicial economy as well. It seems like it would be, because the emergency is more difficult to get, it seems like it would behoove everybody in the interest of time and money to combine them in today's hearing. But if we can't do that, that's fine.
Mr. Anagnostou?
Yes, Your Honor. In fact, I was looking at that very issue when I received Ms. Winkles' documents, because it appeared that she was proceeding under the statute that RCW 11-130-185, which talks about RCW 2609-004 and the parental duties, basically. And I thought for today we were going forward on RCW 11-130-225, which is a completely different standard. They have to well, Your Honor's aware, but it's they only get an emergency guardian if it's likely to prevent a substantial harm to the minor's health, safety, and welfare, and no other person appears to have authority, ability, and the willingness to act to prevent substantial harm. So I'm prepared to go forward on that standard, that my client is, he has authority, he has ability, he has willingness, and there's no substantial harm, and he wants his daughter back under the emergency. And I thought that's what we're on for today.
And Your Honor, I was not under any misapprehension. The fact is that, again, like I said, it's more difficult to get. I briefed for the minor guardianship because ability goes back to the parenting functions, and we'll show through the rest through testimony what we need to prove in the emergency. It is purely so that my clients don't have to pay additional funds to then do something that has a lesser standard, and that's why it's been briefed in full. I think a briefing in full is always useful. It kind of marks what may happen in the future, and it will also assist in determining whether or not a parent has the ability to parent.
Yeah. All right, so we're going to proceed under the emergency minor guardianship statute. That's 11-130-225, and that is what I would anticipate counsel will argue. Otherwise, we can proceed with the hearing as you see as you see fit. I would like to get this done by 4:30 if we can. So if you could calibrate your questions to try to get us there, that would be great. Okay. All right. Let's start with the petitioners, and Ms. Winkles, you represent them. If you'd like to make any kind of opening statement, please note that I've read your trial brief 2 hours ago, so I'm aware of what's in it.
Perfect. I will make it short then. As Mr. Anagnostou said, 11-130-225, it states that the emergency is appointed when it is likely to prevent the substantial harm to the minor's health, safety, or welfare. And I'll go through that first, but obviously in this case, we know that the minor's health when the minor was with father was a problem. This is a child that had a significant developmental delay, yet never saw a doctor. It was obvious to anyone that spoke to the child that she had a hearing difficulty, yet nobody did anything. This child went a significant amount of time essentially being deaf or near deaf to the world when she didn't have to be. This caused her speech delays. This caused her a whole host of other issues. She had to go into specialized learning because nobody did anything. Dad had her. Dad could have gotten state for the child. She, as you'll see from the medical records, was fully entitled to care and help for this. Nobody did anything. If she had remained in dad's care, it's likely that the child would still have had nothing done. And that child would be deaf. That child would have no ability to speak at this point. And there would be all kinds of learning and social difficulties that would arise from that. Father has done nothing that suggests that would change. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing and expecting a different result. Dad has not done any classes on how to take care of the health of a child. Dad has no job. Dad is unable to care for dad. You'll hear testimony today talking about how dad doesn't bathe. You'll hear testimony today talking about how dad works 9 hours maybe a week. You'll hear testimony today that if every family member told dad, you can't live with me anymore, that dad would be homeless. You'll also hear testimony today that dad's been kicked out of everywhere he's lived because of the same behavior, that he has gone to no counseling to change, that he has not gone to any sort of treatment, any mental health evaluations. We have nothing from dad. But there are some things we do know about dad, and this goes to the safety and welfare of the child. Dad lives with his girlfriend. His girlfriend doesn't appear to have a criminal record. That's great. But what they failed to disclose to the guardian ad litem, and what they failed to disclose to this court, is that the son of the girlfriend lives there. Now, why is this a problem? Because he's a registered sex offender for the child under 12. Dad, at one point, told the guardian ad litem he was going to move the child there. So at one point, dad believed, in dad's mind, that it was appropriate to move a young child that has no ability to speak or to do anything into the home of a registered sex offender who was already convicted of a child under the age of 12. And you have all those records in front of you in the trial exhibit. That is the inability to parent. You will also hear testimony, and the reason why I brought up the parental functions is because ability to parent is the innate ability to do those things if you have the opportunity. And dad has been given every opportunity in this case. He has been unable to parent. What do I mean by that? Dad doesn't change. When the child was not potty trained, dad would leave this child in wet clothing. The child would have issues because of this for hours. And you'll hear testimony about when dad was actually with her alone, that this child would go hours and hours without being changed because dad would delegate his parental functions to so many other people that dad didn't have the ability to do it himself. So when one woman would leave to go to work or whatnot, then the child would be with dad, nothing would happen. The child would eat candy, the child would eat snacks, the child would not be changed. Essentially, dad was waiting for the next woman to come home and to take care of these functions. You'll hear testimony today that dad has never actually been alone with this child. There's always a woman there that essentially does the parenting functions. And the reason for this is dad doesn't have the ability. His grandma's always there, his girlfriend's always there. You'll see the visits from my client where she writes down, even on the video visits, a video where dad physically doesn't have to do anything. Dad still needs reinforcements. Why? He doesn't have the ability to care for himself. He doesn't have the ability to care for this child. The fact is that if we end this emergency guardianship, there is nothing stopping dad from taking that child to the house of a registered sex offender, minus promises. If dad takes the child to grandma's house, grandma already kicked him out when he had the child for not parenting the child, for not being able to parent the child. This is a chronic problem. And the fact is there's probably a solution, and it's probably a mental health solution or something like that. We don't know, because dad has taken no proactive steps to do anything. He's not had mental health evaluations, not had treatment, not done any class for somebody that has the inability to parent. There's no dependency here because, frankly, there's other people to take care of the child, like my clients. Dad knew he was unable. Dad admitted he was unable when he gave over custody of his child to my clients. That was probably the most important decision he made, and the decision he made solely for his child's sake. He gave the child to them to watch. He knew at that point that he was incapable. And then Dad didn't call her. Now, Dad's going to give you all kinds of excuses about how there was a protection order in place. The fact is, the protection order was only against Kelly. He could have contacted his dad at any time. You'll see the text where his dad tells grandma, have him call me. Did he call? No. He could have done any number of things to see his child. There's no protection in place against his child. He actively chose to not do anything. So that comes to the question of, why are we really here today? This man's never been alone with the child. This man's never taken care of the child. When he had the child, he essentially ignored the child playing on his phone. He let other people take care of the child, usually women. Why are we here today? And Your Honor, through testimony, it's going to be shown that we're here today because grandma wants to take care of the child. And that's not Dad. And what that means is, if grandma wants to take care of the child, she too acknowledges that Dad can't do it. And the fact is that this child has thrived. This child went from nonverbal, non-hearing in Dad's care to at grade level. This child can hear. She had surgery. She was put in programs. She's up to level. This is a child that can exceed all expectations if she's with somebody who has the ability to parent, that will look after her health and her welfare. Dad won't. Likely regression is what's going to happen here. We already see that Dad he brings candy, snacks, and toys, as he said at that one hearing, to visitation. He doesn't bring books. He doesn't bring clothes. In fact, you'll see from the text, he always asks my client to have the child appropriately attired for their activity. He's always late picking up. He has all kinds of excuses. He doesn't have the health safety. He doesn't have the ability, the health safety, to prevent the health safety or the welfare. The word substantial is incredibly important here. It is a substantial danger to the child when the father refuses to give the guardian ad litem where he actually lives, when he has no set plans in place, and the only place that is definitely available where he's living right now has somebody who raped a child. That is a substantial danger to that child. Furthermore, the inability to actually look after the health of a child is, again, a substantial danger. The fact that Dad can get kicked out at any time, he's living off the kindness of strangers. If that kindness stops because he upsets them from lack of showering, lack of getting a job, smoking marijuana, whatever he's doing, we have now just made that child homeless too. And all because Dad wants to parent, maybe. He hasn't really shown that either way in this case, but somebody wants him to parent, but he just may not be able at this point. So, Your Honor, my clients, I'm not even going to go through what they've done here. You've read it. My clients were given custody by Dad. Dad knew that they were a good place. He chose them then. Things happened after he got mad, but he knew right then that they were the right ones, and they were. Child can hear, child's that age, child's doing everything that child should be doing. So, Your Honor, we'd ask for the emergency guardianship to be put back in place. And I believe then at that point, I've only been appointed in the emergency, but I will be filing to have that immediately heard on a trial. Thank you.
Mr. Anagnostic?
Yes, briefly, Your Honor, because I don't want to, I think we need to get started with trial. And counsel has brought up a lot of information that's not going to be before Your Honor in deciding this. It's difficult. Here's my issue. I got a young man who's trying to get on his feet, and he's young. He's a young parent, and he has the ability, as the statute sets forth, the ability and willingness to act. And we dispute any allegations that the child is in harm with my client. He should have his child back. The allegations against my client, I guess they'll be based on the proof that counsel brings forth to Your Honor, but there's no indication. This issue is complicated because my client cannot be alone around the petitioner because they've already charged him with a fourth degree assault, and he got criminal charges at least pending, but they were ultimately dropped. It was a restraining order, protection order that was ultimately dropped. He's not going to be alone with them, so he brings a witness, but he's doing the care of his daughter. But it's a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation. So if if he shows up alone, there's going to be issues that he, antagonized him or did some problem. And if he shows up with somebody with him to be a witness, then they're going to complain about that. So he cannot win. He can't win. And if they want him to do classes, or if they wanted him to be evaluated, they absolutely could have requested that at any point up till this time. They didn't request it. And so here we are. You'll hear from him that he's a young man. He's getting on his feet. He has a full-time job. Those allegations that he's not working are just wrong. And his plan for his daughter, but he needs his daughter returned. The petitioners have taken advantage of him, and this needs to end.
Thank you. Ms. Winkle, do you want to call your first witness?
Yes, Your Honor. I would like to call Kelly Craig to the stand. Yes. How are you related to the parties in this case?
Kai Ludwig is Jalen's father, and he has been my partner for over 10 years now. He is Jaden's father, and Kai is my partner.
Okay. And so you're kind of the step grandmother of the child, is that correct? Okay. And how old is the child today?
A little over 3, about 3.5.
Okay. And do you still have the child in your custody at this point?
I do.
At what date did you originally have custody of the child?
She came to, that's a hard one because I allowed Jaden and his girlfriend to come live with me. It was in, I believe, February, and in April, I believe it was April that he signed over custody of her to me.
Okay. And you're talking about
April of what year?
2020, I believe. No, I'm sorry. I don't have the papers in front of me. So it was 2 years ago. So 2021, maybe.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So in 2000, so you've had the child living in your house since 2021.
Yes.
Okay. And in that original time where Jaden lived with you, why was he living with you?
He got kicked out of him and his girlfriend's mother's house because he was not caring for his child.
Okay. I'm going to object to hearsay nature of that answer.
I need a better foundation to see how she knows that information.
Okay. Had you ever been to the house where he was staying?
All right,
No.
I'm going to strike that answer if you're going to go on to a different question. Or are you trying to lay the foundation?
I was laying foundation.
I'm sorry. Okay, go ahead.
Had you personally ever been to the house that he was staying at prior to living with you?
No.
Okay. In that case, Your Honor, I'll just leave it where it's at.
Okay. All right, I'm going to strike that answer as hearsay.
Okay. And when he moved into the house, where did they both sleep?
In a back bedroom.
Okay. And was Mr.
I just need to interrupt a clarification. Both. Who are they talking or referring to? Both. Where did both sleep? Are they talking about my client and his daughter, or?
Why don't we clarify that?
Okay. So you said when they initially moved in, it was Jaden and his girlfriend and the child. Is that correct?
Yes.
And so where did did the child sleep in the same room with them?
At times.
Okay. And when the child wasn't in the room with them, where would the child be?
In my room.
Okay. And if you had to put a percentage of time where the child was sleeping in your room on a weekly basis, an average percentage, about how much of the week was the child spent with you in your room overnight?
At first, not a lot, but as the time went on that they were there, it was more often. So I'd say 50 to 70% of the time. Towards the end, she was with me.
Okay. And why was she with you?
Because they were not getting up with her in the morning and caring for her first thing in the morning. And I would go in and find it to be 11 o'clock and Jalen was still in a wet diaper in her pack and play because they did not provide crib.
I'm going to object without a foundation as to when, it's just like a blatant saying this happened all the time. When?
So you want to narrow it as to time frame. So let's do that.
And Your Honor, just to make a statement as well, if we're going to keep objecting, I think we're going to be past 4:30 here. I'm trying to actually go faster, so I can lay foundation down for every question, but we'll probably be here later on. All right. So you talked about them moving in February of 2021. In the month of February, when the child was staying with you, tell me what in that month, and tell me specifics about what caused you concern about the child not being cared for.
In the month of February, and in every month that they lived at my house, I would often find Jaylyn in wet clothes, wet diapers, in her pack and play, 11, 12 o'clock, hadn't been fed breakfast. If she's been fed anything, it was chips handed to her in her pack and play. She was not, a diaper bag was not being provided for her on outings. I would be providing all diapers, all wipes, all clothing, all toys, all food, everything for this child. There was never a time where Jaden nor Caitlin provided anything substantial for the child.
Okay. And did Jaden have a job then?
Jaden had various jobs through the time, none that he held for longer than a week. He would say that he was going to work, and Kai would take him to town and drop him off at the staffing agency. And because we had a COVID outbreak at the time, we had to try to get a hold of Jaden, and the staffing agency at that time told me that he had not been at work.
Objection.
Sustained. It's hearsay what she was told.
At any point, did Jaden admit to you personally that he didn't actually have a job and that he was pretending to have a job?
Yes.
And on what date did that occur?
The day that he was asked to leave. I'm not sure on the exact date, but the date that he came home and we had COVID, and we asked him about it. He said that he was actually hanging out with friends so he could have a break, and that we asked him to leave that day.
And did he tell you how long he had been without a job?
No.
Okay. And so let's kind of go back. So you noticed that there were significant issues in the morning with the care of the child.
Yes.
Tell me, from the time, let's start at 11 when you found the child, from 11 to 5 p.m. For the months of February, March, and April of 2021, who cared for the child the majority of the time?
Myself or Caitlin Boone.
Okay. And is Caitlin Boone still in the picture? Is he still dating? Is she still dating Jaden?
No.
Okay. And so about how much from February 2021 to April 2021, about what percentage of the day did dad do the basic tenets of parenting? By that, the definition, changing diapers, bathing the child, feeding the child, playing with the child, engaging the child, things of that nature. About how much time for the percentage of the day in those months would you say that Jaden performed the primary parenting functions?
So Your Honor, at this point, I'm going to object to this line of questions as to what does it matter going forward, what happened back in 2021?
And Your Honor, if somebody doesn't make active steps to change their situation and how they act, history is the best indicator of future behavior.
I'm going to overrule. I'll allow the questions, although I am going to be more interested, say, in the last 6 months rather than something that happened 2 years ago.
Okay. So we'll kind of move on. If you can answer that question, though, about how much percentage of the time was he actually parenting?
Maybe 5%.
Okay. So 95% of the time he delegated it to other people. Is that right?
No, he didn't delegate to anybody. We just stepped in and did it because it wasn't being done.
Okay. And in April of 2021, he signed a document giving you custody of the child. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. On the date he signed that, until the no contact order was issued, about how many times did he visit the child?
None.
Okay. So at that point, there was there was nothing in place prohibiting him from seeing you. Is that right?
Correct.
And when was the no contact order put in place? Do you remember?
June 16th, I believe it was the date of my youngest daughter's graduation.
Okay. So for over 2 months, he didn't contact the child. Is that right?
I believe he would call Caitlin once in a while to ask about her. At this point in time, I was sending him pictures and letting him know how his child was doing, but there was not a whole lot of communication at all. He did not come and visit her.
Okay. And did the child have health problems when she came into your care?
Yes.
And can you tell the court about those?
Jalen at 18 months was not speaking any words. She was not even gesturing towards things that she needed. She, in my opinion, as an early childhood educator, was behind in a lot of her gross motor skills. That's climbing up steps, being stable. She couldn't verbalize that she liked something or disliked something, or that she was wet, or any of those issues at all. I couldn't even enroll her in childcare because her immunizations were behind. We had to get her MMR shot before we could even enroll her.
Object to the hearsay nature of this answer at this point.
He's talking about her personal information, I think.
Yeah.
If she's talking about
what
medical,
part was hearsay?
Where she's talking about medical records, she's saying there's no immunizations and those type of things. Those are medical records that need to be introduced if they're going to do that.
And Your Honor, she's talking about her personal experience. We'll get to the medical records. We haven't gone there yet.
She can testify if she brought Jalen to get vaccinations. I'll let her testify to that. Otherwise, if she's testifying about content of medical records, I'll sustain and strike that.
Okay, so you did you also notice an issue with her hearing?
Yes.
And tell me about that.
She wouldn't respond to verbal cues. She wouldn't, you could say her name and she wouldn't respond, wouldn't look at you a whole lot. She kind of just grunted.
Okay. And was it pretty clear that there was something going on with some part of her hearing?
I'm going to object to the leading nature of that question.
Okay, I can change it.
Rephrase it.
Yeah, rephrase it. When you noticed these grunts and things, was it apparent to you what was going on? And if so, how?
Yes, it was apparent to me. I know that at 18 months, a child should be talking. And I feel like as a parent, when there's something wrong with your child, you get them checked out by a doctor. So when I noticed Jalen was not talking, we had her checked out by a doctor and she had been suffering from severe ear infections and fluid behind her ear.
I'm going to object.
Okay.
To the extent that the doctors told her that, I'm going to strike.
And so I'm going to now have you turn to Exhibit 5, which is the initial evaluation. And do you have this in front of you? I gave you guys the trial binder.
It's Exhibit 5.
Yeah, Exhibit 5. Do you have this in front of you, Kelly?
I do not.
Your Honor, I guess I would raise an objection that it's a hearsay document.
Ms. Winkles, why don't we address that?
Yeah.
The rules of evidence do apply to these hearings. So
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yes. So in a family law, in a normal family law action, normal civil action, which this is a civil action, when it's a hearing, medical records are often introduced without a doctor's certification on them. There is an exception under in discovery for medical records. There is no ability to do an ER 904 in this case because this isn't a trial. The only way, as we stated earlier, we can't have it both ways. Either we're doing the full minor guardianship, which would make this a trial, or we're doing the emergency. If you look under RCW 11.130.230, you'll see that this is a hearing. So an appointment of emergency guardian is determined on the basis under, it talks about the section, and then it talks about the outcome of a full hearing. The court may extend it pending the outcome of a full hearing. So what we are in at this point, and they can consolidate it, what we are at this point is essentially a show cause. And so I would argue that because it's a show cause, there is no need to authenticate documents, which is exactly how one gets into a family law case and puts documents into the file. So it's either a minor guardianship trial or it's a show cause hearing. If it's a show cause hearing, just having them in the record is enough to argue what the medical records say. And I can bring that statute up to you if need be.
Well, I'm looking at the statute, Your Honor. I don't go into these hearings without this statute because it's complex, but 11.130.230, I think that's what she cited, is duties of guardian for minor.
No, I cited 225.
225.
Yeah, the one right before. If you look at the bottom of that, it talks about how you can consolidate and go to the full hearing. This is not a full hearing. This is a show cause hearing, which is why it's done on an emergency basis, personally served, and then we show up in court for the emergency guardianship. So you don't have to authenticate evidence the same way, which is why medical records have an issue with authentication. But medical records are allowed in show cause hearings because it's just off pleadings.
All right.
And I can brief that. I don't know if somebody needs it, but I can brief that. That's why they're in family law.
I'm going to allow the medical records. I think given that if they're identified where they're from, there is some sense of credibility and about them. And I think you're right that there's really no ability to do a 904 before this hearing, which is typically how they get authenticated. So I'll allow you to ask your client some questions about it.
Great. Thank you, Your Honor. Okay, you're on Exhibit 5. So looking at this, can you tell me what it is?
It appears to be the initial intake and medical history from the Progress Center.
Okay. And who took her to the Progress Center?
Caitlin at first took her and then did not follow through on appointments. So after she was in my custody, I then followed through and proceeded with the Progress Center for her.
Okay. And did dad ever take her?
No,
Not one time.
no.
Okay. And what was discovered at the Progress Center?
That her speech was severely behind.
Okay. And did they put her on an IEP or any sort of program?
They put her on an IFSP, which is in sort the same exact thing as an IEP for children under a certain age.
Okay. And did you have to pay for that?
No,
Okay. And why didn't you have to pay for it?
because I have through Washington State Medical paid for it because it was a need.
Okay. So the child, regardless of her place with you, the child had a need and the state was providing them for that need. Is that correct?
Yes.
If somebody else wanted to take, well, I won't need to ask that, but so her child or her health insurance through the state, was that through her? Who was that through? Was that through you or somebody else?
At first it was through Jaden. And then after he left, it then went through me.
Okay. But it was through him. So he could have also taken her to this Progress Center. Is that correct?
Yes.
And even if he had no job, there was no money due, correct?
No.
If I can have you, I'll send it to you right now. If I can have you tell me a little bit more about this progress report. So she was developmentally behind in speech. Did they notice anything else?
Her hearing. It said there was no information available regarding newborn hearing screening. It said that she has not had an ear infection. However, right after this, I did take her in to the doctor and she did have an ear infection. It also states that Caitlin made the referral and didn't follow up. There was concerns with Jalen's speech developmental due to a diagnosed developmental disorder, speech and language.
Okay, so she was diagnosed at this point with a speech and language difficulty.
Yes.
And is Jaden's name mentioned anywhere on this initial evaluation?
No.
Okay. And his girlfriend, it sounds like his girlfriend was mentioned a few times.
Yes.
To the best of your knowledge, your personal knowledge, had you ever seen Jaden express concern personally for the child's hearing?
No.
Did you ever see him express concern that the child of 18 months wasn't speaking?
No.
Had you ever seen Jaden make any proactive steps whatsoever to deal with any health issues that the child had while in his care?
No.
I've now sent you Exhibit 6, which is on page 69 is the cover, 70 is the next page. Can you tell me what this is?
These are Jalen's shot records.
Okay, and who took her to this appointment?
I did.
Okay, and at this appointment, did she receive vaccinations?
She did.
Okay, according to the doctor in this report, it looks like her vaccinations were all done on one day. Can you tell us why all of her vaccinations were, it looks like they were all done 5/14/2021.
Because
I'm going to object if she's testifying as to what a doctor believes, or I mean, I'm not sure what.
Yeah, I sustain to the extent that it's going to reflect what a doctor told her. If there's another answer to it, then that she's personally aware of, then she can answer that.
Okay.
I took her. I'm sorry.
Oh yeah, go for it.
I took her to the doctor because at the time I was a assistant director at a child care center. And in order to enroll Jalen into services at that center, she has to have certain immunizations that she did not have. So in order to get care for her while I was working, Jalen had to have all of these vaccinations at that time.
Okay. And
I object to the part of it where she indicates she had not had. I don't know.
Yeah, I'll strike the statement she had not had.
And Your Honor, again, we're going to be here a long time. I will be more than happy to go through each of those questions and do it. And that's what I was getting to, is to authenticate why she believed that. I'm not sure if that helps out at all. I wasn't going to just leave it like that. Okay, Kelly, did you have any personal knowledge? How change that? Why did you believe that the child had not had vaccinations?
First, because of the fact that when trying to enter her into childcare, I was told that she had to have these vaccinations to enter.
Okay.
And they did.
But how did you know she didn't have them?
So when you enroll a child in childcare, the director of the center pulls up her immunization records and then notifies you which vaccinations the child needs at that time.
Okay. And if you look at page 71, which is part of that, it's the next page in that immunization.
Yes.
That certificate of immunization.
That is-
Now, this is a Washington state document. Is this what you're talking about?
Yes,
Okay. And on this document, when you took her, were the vaccines on this? Were there any vaccines on this document?
I am not aware what was on that document when I took her because I did not have access to this document when I took her in. I was
Okay.
just told that she was behind in some vaccinations that she needed to be enrolled.
She can't testify to be what she was told.
Yeah, so I'm getting there. So the 12/8/2022, that's your signature there, correct?
Yes,
Okay, so at this point, this is the record of the child's immunizations, correct?
yes,
Okay. Do you see on that record any vaccines prior to 2021?
no,
Okay. Had you ever discussed with Jaden vaccines for the child?
yes.
Okay, tell me about that conversation.
When I was made aware that she could not enter into childcare until these vaccinations were made, we had talked about them. He admitted that she was behind in vaccinations. I had made her a doctor's appointment because I'd asked Jaden to several times and he did not. And I took her in to get these vaccinations.
Okay, so he admitted that he was behind. Did he give you a reason why he was behind in your vaccinations?
No,
Okay. And you stated that you'd asked him to call this the healthcare provider and set up the vaccine.
Yes.
And did he make any phone calls?
no,
Did he express any concern over vaccinations for children?
no,
Does he, to the best of your knowledge, your personal knowledge, does he subscribe to any faith or religion that believes in not giving children vaccines?
no,
Was there any justification he gave for why he didn't get the child vaccinated?
no,
And you eventually took her. Did you inform him prior to taking her that you were taking her to get vaccines?
yes,
Did he tell you, don't do it, I'll do it?
no,
Did he come with you?
no.
On the day you took her for vaccines, where was he at?
I am not sure.
And for any of the subsequent doctor's appointments prior to the no contact order, did he offer to go with you?
No,
Did he express any interest in the medical information?
no,
Did he ever ask to see any of the documentation?
I'm going to object to the leading nature of these questions. I mean, why doesn't the witness testify?
I'm going to overrule. Go ahead.
Did at any point, did you, let me ask this better. When you began taking her to all these medical appointments, did you have his name blacklisted or strike his name as being able to pick up any of the medical records from the facility?
no. Actually, when I first started taking him, his name was the sole person on it, and I was the available person to take her to the appointments.
Okay. And I think we actually have that in here as well. And it was under his insurance and he was listed as the father, correct?
Yes,
Okay. And to the best of your knowledge, did he ever go and pick up any of the records from the facility?
not to my knowledge, no,
Did he ever ask to read them while he was at home, still living with you?
no,
And did you continue to take her to these evaluations?
yes,
And Your Honor, I don't know if we're admitting into evidence because it's a strange procedure, but I guess I'd like to admit Exhibit 5 and 6 in. I'm not even sure what the procedure is for that in a show cause.
Well, yeah, I mean, the objection is that they're hearsay documents.
All right. So noted. I'm going to admit them.
Going on to, and I don't want to belabor this point, but I think the treatment records are important, but I hate to take up more of the court's time. You just stated that you continue to take her to treatment. How often would you take her to treatment?
What treatment are you referring to?
The Progress Center.
Progress Center. She had Progress Center at first, I believe, every other week, and then it moved to every 2 weeks, and then it moved to once a month.
Okay. And what were they doing? What types of things were they doing at the Progress Center?
A lot of it was through play. So her technician would come in, she would play with her, she would sign language with her and show her certain things, and we would work on getting Jalen to say these beginning sounds and such like that, but it was all play based.
Okay. And about how much of you, so she's in these play dates, but after that, was there any amount of time that you would spend also working on the child's speech and behavior?
Every single night.
Okay. And about how long every single night would you spend with her?
An hour, but again, it's play based, so it's not as if I'm sitting down making her say things. We would, oh, look at the ball, look at the ball, and we would go things like that. So in the evening when we got home, it was always about making sure we're talking with her and making sure we're pronunciating things for her and such.
Okay. And at some point, did that Progress Center come to an end?
Yes.
And tell me about what led up to that. And
we were at our last
Excuse me, Mr. Ludwig, there's, this is as if we're in court, so there's no smoking. Thank you. Go ahead.
At a visit before our last one, I believe her name is Jordan, told me that Jalen is doing.
Sorry.
And I'm going to authenticate that document as well. So I guess yeah.
The technician told me that
I'm going to sustain that objection. She can't testify.
Okay, so wait 1 second. I'm sorry,
Okay.
my computer's a little slow. I just emailed you exhibits 8 and 9.
I'll try it again.
Did you get those?
Not yet.
no, not yet.
Counsel, I think we can get around the hearsay thing. If she can testify to when Jalen was discharged from Progress Center, and 9, she can testify as to her improvement in
Okay.
her vocabulary.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that they were in the record as well, but
I have
okay.
them now.
Okay, perfect. So the notice of discontinuation, that's exhibit 8. Is that the technician that you were speaking to earlier when you testified?
Yes.
Okay. And so according to this, can you tell us what date did they decide that she no longer needed the services?
Officially 3/24/22.
Okay. And on that, it says child met developmental goals. Can you tell us what that means to you based on this document?
Yes. Jalen was speaking at a normal level for her age. She was communicating with combined signs and verbal. They told me that services were no longer needed, that Jalen was up to her age level in the skill now.
Okay. And so by 2022, it sounds like a little over a year, I believe you said that she was with you earlier. She went from not being able to speak to being up to level. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And if you look at exhibit 9, and this is going back, it says it's a visit from July 30th of 2021. Tell me, is this an accurate representation of where she was just the year before? She's nonverbal. She says and babbles, but nothing else. Is that about where you remember her personally being?
Yes.
Okay. So in 1 year, she made significant progress under you, with you.
Yes.
Okay. Now, how is she today?
She's very talkative, very spunky. She knows what she wants when she wants it. She tells people how it is. She's happy. She is bright and smart and knows her colors and can sing the alphabet, and she's exactly where she needs to be at her age.
Okay. And about how much time during the day do you spend working with her?
Every night when we get home. She is in preschool at the moment, so she goes to preschool all day, and then she comes home, and when we pick her up, we work on things, variety of things. Her toys are geared for learning. We work on her colors and her letters and her numbers, and just various things to help her learn for the remainder of the evening. She cooks with me. We learn about food.
And I'm sending you exhibit 7 now. And where does she go to preschool?
We care daycare and preschool.
Okay. And you worked at We Care in the past, correct?
I did, yes.
Okay. And were you in the same classroom? Was she in the same classroom with you? No. Okay. And so she was there essentially all day in preschool. And
Yes.
was there ever a prohibition on Mr. Ludwig, Jaden Ludwig, seeing his child at preschool?
No,
And the no contact order, who was that against?
me.
Okay. But there was nothing against his child.
No.
Okay. Did Mr. Jaden Ludwig, prior to this court case, did he ever pick up the child from there?
I believe him and Caitlin dropped her off once, but never picked up.
Okay. And did they come to any of the functions that they have there, like open house or any
No.
of those things? And if you look at exhibit 7, it says We Care Daycare time card detail. Do you see that?
Yes.
Okay. And what is this?
This is a daily attendance tracker of what time Jalen is dropped off in the morning, what time she is picked up in the afternoon, and who is doing the dropping off and picking up.
Okay. And if you just scan through this quickly, looking towards the end, do you see the father's name listed on this document at all?
No,
Okay. To the best of your knowledge, as you stated earlier, I just want to make this clear. Jaden never picked the child up. Is that correct?
no.
And this looks like it goes from April of 2021 all the way to March of 2023. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And so for nearly 2 years, Dad never picked the child up from school, according
I'm
to
going
this
to
document.
object to
Is that
the
right?
comment on the evidence. The evidence is the evidence, Your Honor.
Sustained.
To your personal, did Dad ever, after the no contact order was issued, did Dad ever call you and request to go pick up the child from daycare?
No.
Did Dad ever request records from the daycare?
Not to my knowledge, but I'm not the director to be the one asking the questions to. So I was never told that he has ever asked for any records.
Well,
Did he ever ask, and I was going to change that question, did he ever ask for the records from you?
No.
Did he ever ask you to discuss where she was at developmentally?
No.
Can you tell me what you, from his affect that you personally saw, from his behavior that you personally saw, can you tell me about how you gauged his level of interest in her education?
He has never gauged even to this day, any level of interest in her education. He has never asked where she's at developmentally. He's never asked if she's on par with what she needs to be doing. Nothing of that sort.
Okay. And so kind of moving on to things that are more current. Tell me, what happened, what precipitated the no contact order?
Let me, we may have to go into this, but I've read the police report. Mr. Agnostiu, would you agree that I could rely on the police report as to that incident? I understand the police report's hearsay, but we can move through this testimony if I can just rely on that.
That's fine, Your Honor. Yeah, I'll take that too.
Okay. I've read the police report. I have a pretty good idea what precipitated it. I don't think we need to go into lengthy testimony on it.
Wonderful. Okay. So after the no contact order was put in place, at some point, let me say how to say this. At some point, the no contact order went away. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And when it went away, tell me about the first time you saw Dad after that point.
The first time I saw Dad after that point was quite a few months after the restraining order went away, and he came and took Jalen.
Okay. And you said quite a few months. How many months was it after the no contact order was dropped that you had any contact with Mr. Jaden Ledwood?
I believe it was 6 months, but I was not aware that the restraining order was dropped until he came to get her.
Okay, so for 6 months, the no contact order's gone, and for 6 months, it's your testimony that Dad had no contact with you.
Correct.
Did Dad have any contact?
There's an objection here, Mr.
Yeah. My objection is to foundation. I mean, we're talking about what 6 months period are we talking about? I mean,
Okay, I can
sure what they're talking about.
Again, I'm just trying to go faster, but
Why don't we start with when did Mr. Ludwig show up to get Jalen?
When did Mr. Ludwig first show up after the no contact order had been dropped?
October 1st.
Okay. And to the best of your knowledge,
2022, excuse me.
Yes. Sorry.
and to the best of your knowledge, do you remember the day the no contact order went away?
No, I do not remember the day. I'm sorry.
Okay. Do you know the day? And you can't ask him. I'll ask
Okay,
him.
sorry.
Okay, so prior to the no contact, or sorry, prior to him showing up at your door, and we'll get to that. And what day was that again that he showed up at your door?
October 1st.
Okay. So October 1st, prior to October 1st, how long had it been since he had made any contact with you?
With me personally, the day that the restraining order came into place.
Okay. And to the best of your personal knowledge, so with your own eyes and ears, how long had it been since he had made contact with the child?
The same amount of time.
Okay. And had he made, again, your personal knowledge, not what you've been told, so what you've overheard, had he made contact with anyone in your household?
Yes.
Okay. And who had he made contact with?
He made contact with his father.
Okay. And do you remember the date that occurred?
I do not remember the date. I do believe it was in February of 22, though.
Okay, so in February 22, you're personally aware that he made contact with his dad. And it's also your testimony that in October 2022, that's the first time he made contact with his daughter. Is that correct?
Yes.
During that period of time from February to October, at any point, did he contact you and ask for visitation with the child?
No.
Okay. At any point that you overheard with your own ears, did he request visitation from any other person?
No.
Now, when he took the child, can you tell me about the circumstances of what did he do with the child? Did you have any personal information about what you saw or witnessed him do on October 1st?
October 1st, we were out birthday shopping for Jalen's 3rd birthday, and we got a phone call from Jaden's grandmother asking if we were in town because they were coming to get Jalen. Kai, what I heard on the phone, Kai telling his mother that if Jaden would like to talk about this, he could call himself, and he did. And he stated that he was coming to get Jalen. We got off the phone. We called the sheriff's office. We came to find out that the paper that Jaden had signed is not a legal affidavit, so he could have came anytime to get her. We were told that we had to relinquish her, and Jaden showed up, took her to a hotel room with himself, his girlfriend, the grandmother and the grandfather, and kept her overnight.
Okay. And that was in October of 2022.
Yes.
Okay. From June of 2022 to October of 2022, had you heard anything from father's side, I should say, requesting a telephone call with the child or anything of that nature?
No.
Okay. Where was Mr. Ludwig, Jaden Ludwig living, to the best of your knowledge, in June of 2022?
I have no idea where he was actually living.
Okay. Do you know where he was living in July of 2022?
No.
How about August of 2022?
No.
September 2022? Nope. How about in October, when he actually came to get the child? Were you made aware from him, his personal words, where he was living at that time?
Not on October 1st. However, on Jalen's birthday party, later, I believe the following weekend, was told that he was staying at his girlfriend's house to get work. And then later on in the conversation, he was stated that he actually was living with his mother in a trailer in Reedsport. So there was two conflicting stories as to where he was actually living.
Okay, let's get the time for those. So when was the child's birthday?
October 11th.
Okay, so on October 11th, is that the date that he stated he was living with his girlfriend?
Yes.
Okay, and what's his girlfriend's name?
Michelle.
And what's her last name?
Oh, I'd have to look at it.
Okay, it's
Sorry.
Okay. Is it Michelle Harrington?
Yes.
Okay. So he told you on the child's birthday that he was living with Michelle Harrington. Where does she live?
In Silverton.
Okay. And then he told you subsequent that he was living with his mother. When did he tell you that? What date?
On the same day.
Okay. Where does she live?
Reedsport.
Do you know where that's at in relation to Miss Harrington?
It's quite a few hours away.
Okay.
I believe.
And can you tell me, did he work at that point? Did he make you aware of any job that he held?
No.
Okay. Did you ask?
No.
Okay. And at that point, tell me, when did visitation with the father actually begin?
We filed papers that following Monday, and it wasn't until our very first court hearing that he was granted visits.
Okay. And what kinds of visits was he originally granted?
The first original one, the judge said he could have Saturday and Sunday visits and 2 calls during the week. Jaden stated that he could not afford to do both Saturday and Sunday visits. So the judge stated that he could stick with Saturday visits then, and then have 2 calls during the week.
Okay. And did you make any documentation, or how did you keep track of what was going on at that time?
In a spiral binder.
Okay. And you submitted those to the court in this case, correct?
I did.
Okay. And Your Honor, I'm having trouble pulling this up, but how did you keep track of it? Did you journal, or what did you do?
It's just a journal, the date, anything that pertained to the visit, if there was a visit, a lot of the times who was at the visit.
Okay. And so he starts these visits. Can you tell me from October 22nd, 2022 to current, how many telephone visits, so the telephone calls only, has he been completely on his own for that visit?
None that I'm aware of.
Okay. Now, can you tell me, let's just go through some, if there's some that are completely outlined, we can talk about those. On the whole, tell me what happens during those visits.
On the telephone visits?
Yes.
He calls. I have Jalen the phone. Sometimes she walks around with it. A lot of the time she is in my lap. He asks her how she's doing, if she went to school, tells her he loves her, and asks her what he wants to do this weekend. And then it's kind of a repetitive thing over and over again. A lot of the times I will say, tell daddy what you drew today at school. Tell daddy what you had for lunch. Tell daddy what you want to do this weekend. Tell daddy, what sound Santa Claus makes. I'm trying to help the conversation along.
Okay. And does he do that himself? Try to ask the child those types of questions?
A whole lot of what did you do at school today? A lot of repetitive, what do you want to do this weekend? There's not a whole lot more reaching after that.
Okay. Aside from dad talking, does anyone else engage with the child during those telephone calls?
Yes, Michelle.
Okay. And tell me about that. Tell me what you've personally seen.
I see that Michelle does talk to Jalen a lot. She asks her many questions. Jalen is eager to talk to Michelle. She often asks for Michelle. And they get on. Michelle will ask her how her day went and ask her if she's done anything today. Sort of the same questions, but a little bit more in detail.
Okay. So on the whole of those conversations, the telephone, what percentage of the speaking would you attribute to dad, and and the percentage of speaking to Michelle Harrington, to the child?
Dad is definitely on the video calls more than Michelle is. But there's not a whole lot of real good conversations going on there besides me trying to help the conversation along. He will ask questions on the questions I've suggested, like, tell dad what you got for Christmas. Oh, do you remember that? And then he'll ask a question to it, and then I'll be like, tell dad this. And then he'll ask a question after I've prompted it.
Okay. And about has he ever missed any of those visits?
He has missed quite a few phone visits.
Okay. And about how many would you say he's missed since October?
I couldn't give you an actual number, probably 10, 15 maybe.
Okay. And you wrote them down, and my internet appears to
Yes.
not be working, but you wrote them down on the exhibit 10, which is your handwriting.
Yes.
Sometimes. Okay. And is that an accurate record, exhibit 10, of what was occurring at those times?
Yes. Very accurate.
So when it says no in-person or no chauffeur call, that is an accurate statement of what occurred on that day of that visit. Is that correct?
Yes.
So going to the in-person visits, how many of those visits would he miss on average? So if you looked at the total amount of visits he had, what was it, one per week, correct? Mm-hmm. How many weeks would he go without a visit?
He's only actually fully missed a couple visits. There has been visits where he showed up incredibly late to, or asked to have early visits and then not showed up early for the visits, or dropped her off early from the visits.
And about how many times would you say he's dropped her off early from the visits?
Probably 10.
10 visits since he started.
Yeah.
And about how early are we talking about?
Sometimes it's 10, 15, sometimes it's 30 minutes early.
And did he ever give you a reason why he was dropping her off early?
No.
Okay. And of all the in-person visits, have you ever seen him by himself?
There was one time where he stated he was by himself and had nobody with him. But I cannot actually for a fact know that he didn't have somebody with him at that visit.
Okay. And all the other times minus that one, you personally saw somebody else present for the visit. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And who was that generally?
Michelle or Teresa.
And who's Teresa?
Teresa is Jaden's grandmother.
Okay. And did you ever see him interact with the child during any of those visits?
No, only at pickup.
So they would pick up and they would go somewhere else. Is that correct?
Yes.
And when the child was returned to you, what was the state of the child?
Oftentimes she was dirty. There were a few times that she was wet, and Jalen does not like to be wet, so she'll make it very clear that she's wet. There was one visit we met at the Winco parking lot, and she gave me a hug, and the first thing out of her mouth says, "I'm wet. I need changed." So we immediately changed her pants right there in my vehicle in the parking lot. There has been times recent that she has pottied her pants and then they have changed her, but stated that they could not find a bathroom.
Okay, what did you believe that meant?
That they were playing somewhere and Jaden told one of them that she had to use the restroom and they did not find a restroom.
It's speculation. Speculate.
I'm going to sustain both on that, and also she said Jaden told her, and that would be hearsay.
And to be honest, I was just trying to figure out how she was defining that, but that's fine. So somebody's always there. Did he ever stay overnight with the child?
No, only that on that October 1st visit.
The October 1st visit when there was no court intervention at all. That's the only time. In the last 2 years, how many times has the child been overnight with her father?
One time.
In the last 2 years, are you aware of any time? Oh, let me clarify that. In the last 2 years, are you aware of any time, you're personally aware of any time that the dad has been alone with the child, alone, nobody else there, for more than 5 hours?
No.
When Mr. Ludwig lived with you, had you ever personally witnessed Mr. Ludwig changing the diaper of the child?
No.
In the time that he lived with you, did you ever personally witness Mr. Ludwig showering or bathing the child?
No.
During the time that he lived with you, how many times on average per week would you witness Mr. Ludwig bathing or showering himself?
Not very often. And if he did, it was prompted by his girlfriend, Caitlin Boone.
In the time since he moved in with you to now, have you personally ever seen Mr. Ludwig providing nutritional content? By that I mean not chips, not snacks, but actual something over a snack to the child?
No.
In the same 2.5 years, have you personally ever witnessed the father taking the child to a doctor's appointment?
No.
Have you personally ever seen the father reading a book to the child?
Not by himself.
And what do you mean by not by himself?
There was one visit where it was a phone visit and Michelle and Jaden took turns reading pages to her.
Counsel, one of your questions was, has the father ever had the child overnight? And I question, well, the court has not allowed overnight visits.
Right.
And so I don't know that question really elicits anything negative for the father.
Yeah, so I'm from the next person that's going to testify. The protection order was dropped in June. So we're talking June to October, there's no protection order. And that is where that question becomes important. Unfortunately, I can't ask her because she doesn't remember the date of when the protection order was dropped, but there is a significant.
Your client testified that as soon as he came to get the child, she called the sheriff. So I still don't know how that's helpful and how that's negative on the father, that he hasn't spent any overnight, because either I haven't allowed it or Ms. Crape hasn't allowed it.
Okay. In that case, from the period of June 2022 to October of 2022, how many times did the father call the child?
Never.
In that same period, how many times did the father drop Christmas presents off for the child?
Never.
In that, or not Christmas, presents of any nature for the child, sorry.
Never.
How many times did he?
I'm going to object, Your Honor. At this point, I'm going to object. It's obvious to me that counsel is going through the parental issues under 2609-0004 and not, prevent a substantial harm to minors' health, safety, welfare, and no person appears to have authority, ability, and willingness. I mean, we're off into parenting issues under RCW 2609-004 and not what this case is about.
And Your Honor, I would argue, I would argue willingness. If there's no protection order in place, if there's nothing of that nature, if the original custody order isn't valid, then showing the dad had absolutely no contact, including not providing food, money, or any assistance to the child, any bond with the child during that period of time, I believe shows that dad does not necessarily have a willingness to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the child. There's nothing in place preventing him at that time, no court order or anything of that nature. And dad not providing food, not providing anything to the child. And he had no idea.
Straight agnostic.
Well, it's just that, he hasn't had the opportunity. The one time that he came and got his child, they went out and filed this action and took her away. He's had the willingness. He just has the ability based on court orders.
and Your Honor, I'll get to that, but the fact is that he couldn't have seen in the future. So if he had tried that argument in June, if he had come in June, that argument would make sense. But in October, it doesn't make sense unless he has the ability to see the future in June and know what was going to happen.
All right. So I'm going to overrule the objection. I think the questions go to willingness and ability. However, I'd like counsel to be aware that I think you've made your point about 3 times now.
Okay.
So, 3 times over.
Okay.
Also, I'm anticipating testimony from Mr. Ludwig as to whether he felt constrained on doing any of those things because of whatever factors were in play.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, Kelly, since October, or actually since June, have you? I guess I could go back in time. When he showed up at your door in October, did you immediately call the sheriff?
Yes, I called the sheriff beforehand because he was just going to take her, and I had no idea if it was a safe and healthy place. I anticipated, in my view of when he wanted her back, that would be a sit-down conversation. Let's figure out how this is in the best interest of the child, figure out those type of things, not just come and take her and be gone.
From the time that you realized the protection order was no longer in place, have you personally reached out to Jaden through him or through a third party in order to facilitate the bond between him and his child?
I'm a little confused on that question. Are we talking since the court proceedings have started?
Or before that, when the moment you became aware that there was the no contact order was gone, what efforts have you made to make sure that the child is protected, but also that the child has a bond with their father?
So I was not made aware until the October 1st date that it was there. However, since the court proceedings have taken place, I have offered alternative times for him to call Jalen. I have offered extra time during visits. I have offered extra days of a visit. I was made aware that they would be coming down for a Saturday, Sunday visit, but they were coming down mid-evening, Friday evening. And I told them that if they also wanted to see Jalen that Friday night, that I would be okay with that, since they are making that trip to see her, and I was not taking up on that offer. Jaden personally asked me if I would be willing to meet him and Michelle and have the families together and go to OMSI together. And I told him that whenever he was ready to do that, I'd be willing to do that also. When we show up to visits, I am super excited to see Jaden. It's, oh, look, your daddy's here. Oh, look, Michelle's with your daddy. When they leave, it's make sure you give daddy love bye-bye. Make sure you give Michelle love bye-byes. So to the best of my ability, I feel like I am promoting every relationship I can possibly with the two of them.
And you also have, as you testified earlier, you've tried to keep the child engaged on the phone, correct?
Yes.
And then there are some text messages in here concerning when they come to pick up the child. Have they ever requested clothing or other items to be sent with the child before their visits?
Yes.
Okay. And have you ever told them, no, you get your own, or anything of that sort of nature?
Only when we were already there waiting at the visit, when it was requested, like certain items to be gotten that I had not been able to get them for them, but I do supply a bag for her during all visits.
Okay. And of the requests they've made for additional things like comfy clothes and such so forth, have you always tried to endeavor to do to provide those things?
Absolutely. Okay. I want Jalen to be comfortable all the time, not just when she's in my care.
Okay. And can you look at the email? It would be Exhibit 10 that came to you. This is the journal you're talking about?
Yes.
Okay. And these are all the visits. And if they didn't happen, did you journal that?
Yes.
And if you gave them or if you offered more visitation, did you journal that?
I'm not sure that I remember journaling the more visitation. I was just making sure that I journaled when they happened and when they did not. Okay. I do have that through text messages though.
Okay. And it says December 26th rescheduled visit from the 24th. And is that in December? Is that the type of thing you would do, is reschedule visits if need be? Okay.
Yes.
And then if you go to Exhibit 11, which has also been sent to you. And who would often text you about the child?
Michelle.
Okay. And is this what this text message stream is? Is that between you and Michelle?
Yes.
Okay. And I noticed it says, "Hi, I was wondering if we could pick Jalen up tomorrow at 11:45. We'd like to take her to the Children's Discovery Museum in Longview."
Yes.
Do you remember this?
I do.
Okay. And what did you say to that?
Absolutely.
Okay. And it says something great. "I've already texted Kelly. Your grandmother is already bugging me." Was that to you?
No, that was, she had messaged me, but I'm guessing that she was messaging Jaden and messaged me by accident.
Okay. And they asked later on, it looks like, to pick up even earlier. And what did you say to that?
Yes.
Okay. And did you have any problems saying yes to that?
No.
Okay. And did they pick her up early?
No.
What happened?
I believe that they were running late. I'm not sure what I don't recall what the reason was, but I know that we had already left the house and that they were running late and they did not come get her at that earlier time.
Okay.
Counsel, can I have a time frame on when this was? What month?
What month was that, Kelly?
March of 23.
All right, thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry. On mine, it shows up on the picture. Is the copy not good enough on yours?
Okay, I've got, looks like 127.
127, and then for that one, and then the other one is 313. It's
Okay,
really
yeah.
light though.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So do you have any problems with the child having a bond with her father?
No, I've actually promoted it. There's actually been times during the week that it is not a call time. And we were talking about her dad or something came up about her dad and we'd call him.
Okay. And since you've been around the child so much, what do you personally believe would make it better for the child? How to put this? You're obviously not a medical expert. I'm not asking that, but is there anything that would make you personally more comfortable to having dad have expanded visitation with the child?
Knowing, maybe having Jaden have some time alone with her so he could actually take care of her. I don't know if I'm out of line for saying this or not, but during these 5-hour visits, it's fun time. And parenting a child for 5 hours at a bounce house is very, very different from parenting a child for 2 days and providing naps and bedtime routines and such like that. So I would be more comfortable if Jaden would be at these visits by himself and doing these things for her.
Okay. And do you know where Jaden lives today?
Jaden lives in Silverton with his girlfriend.
Okay. Are you sure about that? Because it appears from some of the reports that were put in that he may live with his grandmother. Do you know anything about that?
I know that he has stated to the guardian ad litem in the report that she gave me that he lives there. But
and
I don't need to go into that, but do you?
So I'm going to strike that answer.
Do you personally know for certain 100% where Mr. Ludwig resides?
Yes.
Okay. And how do you know that?
He's told me.
Okay. But if he's told someone else something different, has anyone, to your knowledge, your personal knowledge, ascertained with a 100% certainty where Mr. Ludwig actually resides?
No, not 100% certainty.
Okay. To the best of your knowledge, has he ever provided, since this case started, has he provided any presents or anything for the child since this case started?
Yes. So he will often get little trinkets out of the machines and bring toys and such like that to the visits.
Okay. And does he bring food to any of the visits or anything like that?
Applesauce sometimes and Gatorade.
Okay. Has he ever taken the child out for a meal or provided a dinner, like an actual meal to the child since October?
I'm going to object. I'm not sure how she would know what he does with the child unless she's following him.
I think you need to rephrase it if she was told.
Absolutely. Did anyone tell? So actually,
not anyone. If Mr. Ludwig told.
My apologies. Did you ever feed the child any significant amount of food for the child after the child was returned to your care from one of these visits?
I'm sorry. What's the question?
I'm asking, did she feed the child after the child was returned to her care after being with dad?
Yes.
Okay. And what time did he generally drop the child off at?
Most of the time it's between 4:30 and 5 unless he's late, which is rare that he's late. It's normally early. So I would feed her dinner right after the visit.
Okay. And would she generally eat the majority of dinner?
Yes.
Okay. And did any of, did Jaden or did Michelle, did either of them ever speak to you about what food they provided during that visit?
A lot of the time it's McDonald's.
Okay. And who would tell you that?
Jaden or Michelle.
Okay. And did they tell you about anything else that they had brought for the child?
There has been, a coworker of mine has witnessed them at a Mexican
Okay,
food
and I'll
restaurant.
get.
Okay,
Sustained.
sorry.
Okay. Was there any? So there's something about scratches on the child's stomach during one of these visits. Can you tell me about that incident or what?
Absolutely. Since Jaden has been placed in my care, as soon as she wakes up every single day, the very first thing she does is lift up her skirt or her shirt and scratch her belly. This has been documented at daycare. This has been known to anybody that has taken Jalen for any length of time. Knows.
Back to the hearsay part of this answer.
Okay, only what she personally knows.
Okay.
Okay, so has anybody in your household ever touched the child in an abusive way that you've
No.
personally seen here?
No.
Has the child ever disclosed to? No. Has the doctor ever informed? I'm trying to. Normally, I go at things different because it's a little different when you have the medical records. Have you ever engaged with CPS because of the child since the child's been in your care?
Have you ever engaged?
Have you ever engaged with CPS during the time that the child's been in your care?
No.
Now you have
Not
another.
for Jalen's purposes.
So you
Sorry.
have another child that also lives in your home, correct?
Yes.
And it's not biologically yours. Right?
No, he is my foster child.
Okay. And was there a home study done for that foster case?
There absolutely was.
Okay. And that was entered into this case as well, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And that case study, I mean, I don't know what we're doing here for these, but normally it would just be in there. But you passed the case, essentially the home test, and you were able to foster the child, correct?
Yes.
And does the child have any special needs?
Yes.
And what are those?
Tyler is autistic.
Okay.
Very low functioning autistic.
Okay. And how is he doing developmentally in your care?
He's doing well. He has thrived in care with us. He goes to school. He is talking more now. He is bright. He's happy to be here.
Okay. And you have your career history. What is it?
I'm sorry, what was that?
What do you do for a career?
I am a director at multiple sites of a early childhood education that is trauma-based.
Okay. And what's your education in childcare?
I have my associate's degree in early childhood education.
Okay. And so you actually have training in providing care to children of what ages would you say?
Normally birth to 5. However, my specialty can go up to the 3rd grade.
Okay. And just jumping around, have you ever seen your husband on more than one occasion in the last 12 months consume more alcohol or consume alcohol to a point of being intoxicated?
Absolutely not.
Okay. To the best of your knowledge, has Mr. Jaden Ludwig ever had an apartment or any other housing in his name, in his own name? Okay.
Not that I know of.
Does he have a driver's license to the best of your knowledge?
To the best of my knowledge, he does, but I've never seen it.
Does Mr. Ludwig, to the best of your knowledge, have you ever seen him with a car that he owns?
I've seen him with a car, but I'm not sure who the actual owner is of the car.
Okay. Since the time you've known Mr. Ludwig, have you ever been personally aware of Mr. Ludwig being employed for at least 35 hours a week for a period of longer than 6 months?
No.
To the best of your knowledge, has Mr. Ludwig ever gone to like a university or college to obtain a degree? To the best of your knowledge, is Mr. Ludwig in any sort, has he provided you, I should say, with any sort of treatment records or evaluations or anything of that in the last 12 months?
No.
Okay. To the best of your knowledge, has Mr. Ludwig given you any document or any evidence or even said to you anything about any program or facility or class or anything of that nature to assist him in parenting his child or to assist him in bettering himself?
No.
I have no further questions, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. Mr. Ananasta, before we do cross, I need to take a break here. So it is, let's say 3:10. Let's be back at